time we gathered together for a holiday share that I gave, we discussed the minimum requirement of intent that a person must have in order to fulfill his chiyuv of Shemon Esrei. And we discussed how the first bracha of Avos, one has to have in mind the understanding of the words, the Perush HaMilim, perhaps an additional kavanah that you're standing, you're Omed Lifnei HaMelech. Today, I want to discuss the kavanah that's essential for Kriya Shema. So we all know that Kriya Shema is a mitzvah saseh d'oraisa. There's a big machokas rishonim exactly how much of Kriya Shema is considered d'oraisa. At what point does the d'oraisa end and the d'Rabbanan pick up? But everyone agrees that at least, at minimum, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, and perhaps including Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuso D'Olam Va'ed, would be the biblical requirement of Kriya Shema. There are other shittas in the Rishonim that extend it further, but at least Shema Yisrael and perhaps Baruch Shem would be included in the biblical requirement of Kriya Shema. So anytime that we engage in the performance of a mitzvah d'oraisa, first and foremost, one must have intent to fulfill the tzivoy habori. You have to have intent that I'm fulfilling the mitzvah d'oraisa. So that's before we eat shekul of an esrog. One has to have intent that he's doing so to fulfill the mitzvah of Hashem. So too, before reciting Kriya Shema, the most basic intent that a person should have is that he's fulfilling the mitzvah of saying Shema. But additionally to the intent, the general intent that applies by all mitzvahs svichas kavanah, there's a specific intent that's required when reciting Kriya Shema. And that intent overall is the intent to be mekabel olav ol malchus shemayim, to accept upon oneself the yoke of heaven, to accept the ol malchus shemayim on himself. So that intent is something that is me'akev, and if a person recites the first pasuk of Kriya Shema without having intent to be mekabel olav ol malchus shemayim, you are not yotzei Kriya Shema. So first we're going to go through what the ideal kavanah is, and then in the back there's a tshuva in Chelakei in Igros Moshe, where Moshe boils down the most b'di'evid, what the minimum requirement of kavanah is. So in terms of what the ideal intent a person should have when reciting Shema Yisrael, Shema is hear, understand, and accept Kal Yisrael, Shema Yisrael, Hashem. So the Mechaber in Siman Hey tells us that when a person says the Shem Hashem, and for sure when he says it in Kriya Shema, ideally the person should be having intent that Hashem is the master of all, who always was, is, and always will be. So that's the intent that a person should have when saying Hashem. Hashem is the master of all, who always was, is, and will be. And then when we get to Elokeinu, so when we say Elokeinu, ideally we should be thinking who is the master of all strength. He's able to do anything. Hashem is able to accomplish anything. Whatever he wants to do, he could do. Nothing can get in his way. And Hashem takes special care of us. Rav Moshe Feinstein and Rav Yosef say, when saying Elokeinu, that's the point when a person should also think that he's accepting upon himself the kingship of Hashem. Then Hashem, again, is the master of all, who always was, is, and will be. And then when we say Echad, the following should be thought about. That Hashem is the one and only, who rules over the heaven and the earth, and the four directions of the world. Okay, so that's the ideal kavanah that a person should aim to have when reciting the first pasuk of Kriya Shema. And then as well, the kavanah should continue when reciting Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuso D'Olam Va'ed. We should say, praised is the name of the glory of his kingdom. That's referring to the four-letter name of Yud Kei Vav Kei, D'Olam Va'ed, forever and ever. Now, if a person wants to just boil down the kavanah that's required when saying Shema Yisrael, so the minimum requirement of Moshe Feinstein boils it down to that as long as when you say the words Hashem, you think God. You don't have to think Hashem always was and always will be, and he's the master of all. You just have to think God. As long as you think God when you say Hashem, that's also sufficient in order to be Yotzei. But Rav Moshe writes that as long as when you say Hashem Elokeinu, you be Mekabel of Al Malchus Shemayim. So Hashem Elokeinu, you have to think about Ol Malchus Shemayim, and when you say Echad, you must, in order to be Yotzei, you must think that Hashem rules over the Maila, the Mata, and the Daled Ruchos. So that is the Ikuba. So basically, bottom line, according to Rav Moshe, and Rabbi Yosef also writes this, is that a person, when saying Hashem Elokeinu, should be accepting upon themselves the Malchus Shemayim. And when you say Echad, you have to think about the fact that Hashem is the one who rules over the heaven and the earth and the four directions of the world. And then you are Yotzei, the mitzvah of Kriya Shema. When we get to the third parsha of Kriya Shema, that we're not going to discuss today, but the third parsha of Kriya Shema was instituted to fulfill the mitzvah that we're required daily, twice daily, to remember Mechiras Yitzias Mitzrayim. So that mitzvah, a person should also, before beginning the parsha of Vayomer, a person should have intent that he's fulfilling the mitzvah d'oraisa of Zechiras Yitzias Mitzrayim. But in terms of intent and the Perush Hamilim, of understanding the words, that's unique to the first pasuk of Kriya Shema, and that's something that, in order to be Yotzei, a person ideally, or must actually, have at least the minimum requirement of, you understand the words, Hashem Elokeinu, you read Mekabel Olam Malchus Shemayim, Hashem Echad, you're thinking about the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one and only who rules over the heavens, the earth, and the four directions of the world. That's the halacha. When you take a look at Rashi and Chumash on the pasuk of Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, and Dvarim, in Parshas Veschanan, Rashi says, Hashem Shehu Elokeinu, Ata, Hashem who is our God now, V'lo Elokei Umos. And Hashem is not the God of the other nations. In other words, they don't recognize the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they don't accept Hashem as their God upon themselves. Hu li'asid dios Hashem Echad. In the future, he's going to be Hashem Echad. And Rashi has a different understanding. This is not the halacha. The Aruch HaShulchan actually brings this Rashi the halacha, but according to the majority of the poskim, this Rashi is not the halacha. The halacha is what we just discussed, but it's something that brings out a very powerful point within the first pasuk of Shema. So Rashi is saying that we're supposed to think when we say Shema that Hashem Elokeinu means Hashem is our God now. He's not the God of the Umos. But the Asad Lavo, when Mashiach comes, then Hashem will be the God of all the nations as well. And then Rashi quotes the pasuk, Bayom Ahu Yiyah Hashem Echad. On that day, Hashem will be one, Ushemo Echad, and His name will be one. So when we take a look at Baruch Shem Kavod Machusod Yolam Va'ed, it's a little bit confusing. Why is it that we say Baruch Shem? Blessed is His name. If we just accepted the oneness of God upon ourselves, and we accepted the kingship of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we realize that He's the ruler over the whole earth and the whole world, so we should say Baruch Kavod Machusod Yolam Va'ed. Blessed is His kingdom, forever and ever. What's the significance? What's the emphasis on blessed is His name? A name, yeah, represents an individual, but why are we focused on proclaiming praise be His name? You say praise be the king. You don't say praise be the name of the king. The Targum Yerushalmi translates, assumes that Baruch Shem Kavod Machusod Yolam Va'ed is the same as Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbi. So it's the same type of idea. Why we say Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbi? You should be Amen Yehei Rabbi. Hashem should be Rabbi. Why are we focused on Yehei Shmei Rabbi? That the name of Hashem is Rabbi. So we're going to take a look at two different Gemaras in Pesachim to try to get an understanding of this question and come back to the Rashi and the Bar. So, and eventually we're going to connect it to Mechiras Yosef. So just before we go to the Gemaras in Pesachim, the connection to Mechiras Yosef is going to be that there's a fascinating pasuk when Yaakov Avinu was embarking down to Mitzrayim to finally reunite himself with Yosef HaTzadik. The Torah says that Hashem appeared to Yaakov Avinu, and Yaakov was afraid. So Hashem encouraged him, Al Tira, Merida Mitzrayim, don't be scared from going down to Mitzrayim, and Hashem provided tremendous encouragement to Yaakov Avinu. And then Hashem tells him, Anochi Eirudi Mecha, I'm going to go down with you. The Yosef Yashis Yadu Aleinecha. And Yosef will place his hand upon your eyes. So on Shabbos once I spoke about this. What exactly is this reference that Yosef will place his hands on the eyes of Yaakov? So there are many different understandings in the Rishonim what Hashem's intent was. It sounds funny. Yosef will place his hand on Yaakov's eyes. So the Meshech Chachma and the Kol Aryeh, the Talmud of the Chassam Sofer, they both approach this pasuk in a beautiful, beautiful way, which really sheds light on a lot of the first pasuk of Shema Yisrael. What they say is, the Kol Aryeh starts off that there's a Zohar. The Zohar says, "V'Yosef Yoshes Yodo Aleinecha," says the Zohar in Parshas Vayigash, "Da Raza D'Kriyas Shema." Somehow there's a correlation between Yosef placing his eyes on the hands of Yaakov and Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Seems like there's absolutely no connection. So they begin by explaining that we know the halacha is that when we recite the first pasuk of Kriyas Shema, we cover our eyes, cover our face with our right hand. The reason for that in the Shulchan Aruch is in order that we're able to have kavanah, in order that we can have intent. So you want to block out any distractions, any disturbances in the shul. So you either close your eyes or you cover your eyes, and therefore you'll be able to have proper intent, which we just discussed is essential for the fulfillment of reciting Kriyas Shema. So we close our eyes in order to be able to ensure that we have that intent. The Kol Aryeh and based on the Meshech Chochmah develop a different understanding of why when we recite Kriyas Shema we close our eyes. The way the Meshech Chochmah explains Yosef Yoshes Yado Einecha is in an unbelievable way. He says that Yaakov Avinu was petrified of going down to Mitzrayim. Here he was in Eretz Canaan, he has to go into exile. It looks like the Midas Hadin of HaKadosh Baruch Hu struck. Looks like Hashem is starting the exile. The Midas Hadin is striking. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Yaakov Avinu, take a look at the story of Yosef. Yosef Yoshes Yado means the Maisa of Yosef, the story of Yosef, will serve as a light and a reminder that there is no din. When you take a look at the whole story of Mechiras Yosef, Yosef was thrown into a pit with snakes and scorpions, sold off to Ishmaelim, brought down into the land of Egypt as a little child, as a young man, house of Potiphar, thrown in jail. Everything looked like there was no hope. Everything looked like it was over for Yosef. Yaakov's beloved son, Yaakov was suffering from not having knowledge of what happened to Yosef. It was a tremendous, tremendous midas hadin. But ultimately, when you look back, after all the details become clear, and you look back at the story of Mechiras Yosef, you see the absolute hashgacha pratis of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yosef going down to Mitzrayim was a necessary part of ensuring that Yaakov Avinu wasn't dragged down in chains to Mitzrayim, that Yaakov Avinu was able to go down there, that the Gullus began, Klal Yisrael had to go through the Gullus of Mitzrayim in order to ultimately become the nation that was fit to receive the Torah in Har Sinai. So Yosef was put into a position of second in command in Mitzrayim, the Mechiras to provide sustenance to all of Egypt and the rest of the world, and including his family. There was clear hashgacha pratis that took place in the whole story of Mechiras Yosef. While the story was unfolding, it looked like midas hadin. It was impossible to see where's HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what's happening. But as we look back and we see the important and essential role that Yosef played, we see that Yosef was laying the groundwork for Klal Yisrael to unfortunately suffer the servitude of Egypt, which was a necessary prerequisite to be able to be the nation of Am HaNivchor of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We see the shir hashgacha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So on one hand, it looked like din, but on the other hand, it was really ultimately midas haracham. And that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling Yaakov Avinu as he's about to embark down to Mitzrayim. It looks like midas hadin, but let the story of Yosef will place his hands on your eyes. Let the story of Yosef be the story that shows you that although while you're going through something difficult, it might look to you like din, it's really ultimately racham. It's really ultimately all emanating and stemming from the midah of rachamim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Kol Aryeh takes this one step further and he says that why is it that we cover our eyes when we recite Kriyas Shema? Because let's take a look at Kriyas Shema, and we're going to develop this further based on the Gemara's Himsachim. But we say Shema Yisrael, Hashem. Hashem is the Midas HaRachamim. Elokeinu is the Midas HaDin. Hashem Echad. It's all one. There is no such thing as Din. It looks to us like Din. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu has his reasons, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu has his basis for why he does things to us. But ultimately, the overarching force is Rachamim. So when we accept upon ourselves the Omach HaShamayim, Hashem, the Midas HaRachamim, Elokeinu, Midas HaDin, Hashem Echad, it's all one. It's all really Rachamim. That's the reason why we close our eyes. We're blocking out the Din. We close our eyes to, so to speak, figuratively say we're not looking at the bad right now. We're not asking why, how, what, because we realize that it's really ultimately Hashem Echad. It's really ultimately all emanating from the Midas HaRachamim. We might not see it for 30, 40 years, why this is Rachamim, where the Rachamim is. But when we recite the Kriya Shema, we close our eyes and we block off what appears to us as Din to proclaim that really it's all Echad, it's all Rachamim. And that's what the Zohar means when he says, Yosef Yashas Yado Leinecha, Dar Raza the Kriya Shema. The Zohar means that we cover our eyes, we block out anything that looks to us like Din, that we could really accept upon ourselves that ultimately is the Midah of Rachamim. So when you take a look at the Gemara's in Psachim, this point is brought out really very beautifully. The first Gemara in Psachim is on the first sheet on Daf Nun. The Gemara is analyzing the pasuk, V'haya Hashem the Melech, Akol Haaretz. Hashem will be the king on the whole world. Vayomahu, on that day, Yiyeh Hashem Echad. Hashem will be one. And then it says, Ushemo Echad, and his name will be one. So again, Hashem is one, Ushmo Echad. What exactly are the two components? Hashem Echad and Shmo Echad. So the Gemara asks on this pasuk, I don't get it. Atu inna lav echadhu? Is HaKadosh Baruch Hu not one now? We have to wait till the Olam Haba. We have to wait till the Zman HaMashiach for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to be one. Is Hashem not one now? Amar Rabbi Abba Bar Chanina. So Rabbi Bar Chanina answers the question. Lo ka'olam hazeh olam haba. Olam hazeh is not like olam haba. Ha'olam hazeh, in this world, al besuros tovos, when we hear good news, Amar baruch hatov v'amitiv. We make the bracha of hatov v'amitiv. Val besuros ra'os, when we hear bad news, when we hear tragic news, Amar baruch dayan emes. We make the bracha of dayan emes. The olam haba, but in the next world, it's kulo hatov v'amitiv. It's completely only the bracha of hatov v'amitiv. Rashi explains what that means. Why in olam haba is completely hatov v'amitiv? She'ein sham b'sura ra. Because there is no bad news. So therefore, there's nothing to recite the bracha of dayan emes on, says Rashi. Because in olam haba, it's all hatov v'amitiv. Then the Gemara continues. So we just analyze Hashem Echad. What's Ushmo Echad? Atu my Echad. So Atu in the Lav Shmo Echad. Who? Hashem's name is not one now. Only Lasad Lavu, Hashem's name is going to be one. So Amar Nachem Bar Yitzchak. Nachem Bar Yitzchak says, Lo b'olam hazeh olam haba. No, olam hazeh and olam haba are very different. Ha'olam hazeh, in this world, it's nichtav b'yud kei vav kei. Hashem's name is written yud kei vav kei. V'nikra, and it's read aleph dalet nun. Aleph dalet. Avali olam haba, but in olam haba, kulo echad. It's all going to be one. It's going to be nikra yud kei vav kei. V'nichtav yud kei vav kei. So the Gemara is saying that what does it mean ushmo echad? It means now the written word of Hashem's name is Yud Kei Vav Kei. The pronounced name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Aleph Dalet. The Yosef Lavu, it's going to be written and pronounced Yud Kei Vav Kei. So we're going to see more about the meaning of that. But let's go back and analyze the Gemara. The Gemara was discussing this. V'haya Hashem the Melech Akol Haaretz, v'yomahu Hashem Echad. The Gemara asked, now is Hashem not one? Then the Gemara goes ahead and discusses the difference between Olam Hazeh and Olam Haba. it's not clear from the Gemara how it answered its question. The fact that in Olam Hazeh we say a bracha tova meitiv, and we say a bracha of dayan emes on bad news, but in Olam Hazeh it's going to be all good. How does that explain why in V'asid Lavo Hashem is one? How did the Gemara answer the question that it set out to answer? So this is all discussed by the different Prushim of the Gemara, and many Mahalchim are said.
Well, if I can stop you quickly.
Yeah.
What does that mean when we're in Olam Haba? Does that mean the time of Mashiach, or?
I'm not sure exactly, but when we have Olam Haba, Mashiach, both.
Olam Haba, because if we're in Olam Haba, we're going to be neshamas.
It's both, yeah. But
So
we are our neshama. We have nothing. We're just the neshama's housed in a guf. The anochi, who we are, is our neshama. We're nothing more than a neshama. Our bodies are just the place in which our neshama is resting.
So if it's Olam Haba, we're not going to get a mitzvah for saying bracha anyway.
We'll have the recognition of Mushmo Echad and Hashem Echad. So it's not clear from the Gemara how the Gemara answered its question. So there's a beautiful, beautiful Noda B'Yehuda in his sefer in Amsachim Tzlach that develops a beautiful understanding of this Gemara.
What page?
It's the third page. But they're double-sided pages, so the third of the single pages. So he first asks a contradiction between two different Gemaras. We're not going to discuss that now. And he says, I want to say over Pshan in the Gemara that he heard when he was a child from a Rav HaChassid HaMochiach HaGadol HaMeforsim Ephraim Risher, the Maggid the Kahal Kodesh Brad. So he's quoting someone that he heard a Pshan in this Gemara when he was a child. And this Ephraim Risher, who the Noda B'Yehuda refers to someone as a Rav, a Chassid, you can be sure that he was a real Chassid. So the Ephraim Risher asks a very sensitive question on the Gemara. The Gemara is contrasting. Olam Hazeh is different than Olam Haba. What's the contrast? In Olam Hazeh, we recite the bracha Vatov HaMeitiv for good news. We recite the bracha of Dayan Emes for bad news. In Olam Haba, we only recite the bracha Vatov HaMeitiv, as Rashi explained, because there is no bad news. So he says, I don't understand. The Gemara should have said, Olam Hazeh, there's good and bad. Olam Haba, there's only good. Why is the Gemara focused on the bracha? The bracha is a result of whether or not there's good and bad. If in Olam Haba there's no bad, so there's no bracha. So the main point of the Gemara is not that there's not an opportunity to recite the bracha. The main point of the Gemara is that Olam Hazeh, there is good and bad, and Olam Haba, there's only good. It happens to be that if there's good and bad, it happens to be that will result in two different brachos. In Olam Haba, it would only have one bracha, but the main purpose, the main focus of the Gemara is really the contrast of the fact that in Olam Haba and Asad Lavo, there's only good. So why does the Gemara at all talk about the bracha? So that's the question that the Noda B'Yehuda said as a child he heard a beautiful, beautiful answer to. So Noda B'Yehuda explains that when the Gemara tells us the Asad Lavo, it's Kulo Hatov HaMeitiv, what that means is that when we look back at this world and we rewind our lives and we rewind what happened in the world, when we're blessed with the clarity in the Asad Lavo, then we'll see that it was Kulo Hatov HaMeitiv. We'll go back and recite the bracha on what we thought to be Ra. We'll then realize it's really Kulo Tov. So that's the difference. In Olam Hazeh, when we're going through it, it's so hard to see the Hashgacha B'Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's so hard to understand. So then there's a defined Tov where we recite Hatov HaMeitiv. There's a defined what looks to us like Ra, where we Matzdik Olav Hasadin, where we recite Dayan Emes. But in Olam Haba, when we look back, when we look back at what transpired in our lives, what transpired in the world during our lifetime, then we'll be able to see that it's actually Kulo Hatov HaMeitiv. And therefore, we'll go back and recite the bracha on those happenings of Tov HaMeitiv. And that's why the Gemara is focused on the bracha. Because in this world, there is objectively good and what looks to us like bad, and we therefore have to recite 2 brachos. The next world we're only going to recite 1, because looking back at this world, not that in Olam Haba there only be good. That's true. That's not the point of the Gemara. The Gemara is saying that in La'aseh Lavo, we're going to look back at Olam Hazeh, and we're going to be blessed with the realization and the clarity of thought that all that looked to us like din, in actuality, was not din, and it was kula tov. Yeah.
My question then would be, so what's the point of Gamzu Tova then?
That is it. So Gamzu Tova is when a person's on the level.
Is for the good.
So Gamzu Tova is when a person's on the level to, even while they're going through the din, to be able to realize that it's all tov. That's a high level, right? To be able to someone that's full of tragedies in his life and experiences one downfall after the other, to have the clarity and the ability to realize throughout all that this is for the good, even though I don't know why it's for the good, and it might not be clear until 50 years later why it's for the good. To be able to at that time still say Gamzu L'Tova, that was the greatness of Nacham Ish Gamzu. But typically, it's when we're experiencing what objectively looks like Ra, it's typically very difficult for us to see the Tov, to see the good in it. And that's why there's an idea of dynamics. But the Yosef Lavo, when we're all blessed with the clarity of, and we see life rewinded, it's like looking back at the story of Yosef. When we look back at the story of Yosef, it's Yosef Yoshes Yodo. Because you can see from that's one of the strongest indicators that you could look through something and it looks like din after din after din. But then when you take a look after the story unfolded, it's all kula rachaman. It's all tremendous kindness. So that's exactly what's happening. But also Lavo, we'll be able to look back and recite on the things that we thought were ra. We'll be able to recite the bracha of Hatov HaMeitiv. So that's the beautiful thought that the Noda Yehuda develops, the Seif Shan in this Gemara, based on what he heard when he was a child. But let's take a look at another Gemara in Pesachim, and then come back to this. The Gemara in Pesachim on Daf Nun Vav tells us a very interesting story. Tanar Rabbanan, Ketzad Hayu Karchen Es Hashema. What exactly is this meaning of Karchen Es Hashema? So one opinion is Omrim Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad V'lo Hayeh Maspikin. They would say Hashem Echad, and they go straight into the next thing that they said without stopping. Divrei Meir Yehuda Amar Maspikin Hayu. They would pause after Echad. Ela Shlo Hayu Omrim Baruch Shem Kivod Machusod Elam Ve'ed. They didn't say Baruch Shem Kivod Machusod Elam Ve'ed. Now, obviously, when you open up Psukim, there's no pasuk in the Torah Baruch Shem Kivod Machusod Elam Ve'ed. Right? So the Gemara asks, Va'anan my time Aminale. Why do we say Baruch Shem Kivod Machusod Elam Ve'ed? Look at the parsha in Naschanan. It's Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, and it goes straight to V'ahavta. So where do we make up this Baruch Shem Kivod Machusod Elam Ve'ed from? So the Gemara says, Kedidarish Reb Shimon ben Lakish. The Amar Reb Shimon ben Lakish. Vayikra Yaakov Abanav. Yaakov called all of his children in this past week's parsha. Vayomer. And Yaakov said, Hey Osfu, gather, Vagidi Lechem, and I will inform you. Bikesh Yaakov Liglos Levanov Ketz HaYemin. Yaakov wanted to reveal to his brothers the end of the right. So Rashi says, what does that mean, the end of the right? So Rashi says, Sheyachzor Yemino Lefanov, Sheheshev Achar Yemino Mibnei Oyeh. HaKadosh Baruch Hu withdrew his right hand to his back. Metaphorically, he was saying that HaKadosh Baruch Hu took a step away from being there with Klal Yisrael. But the Yosef Lavo, Hashem's right hand, the strength of Hashem, his right hand is going to come forward to the front and redeem Klal Yisrael. So that's a way of saying metaphorically that Yaakov wanted to reveal to the Shvatim, when is the end going to be? When is the end of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's withdrawn right hand? When is Hashem going to put his right hand forward? But HaKadosh Baruch Hu removed the prophecy from Yaakov. The Shekhinah was removed from Yaakov. And he was prevented from revealing the end. Omar. So Yaakov said, he's trying to figure out why in the world was the Shekhinah removed from him. Shema chas v'shalom yesh b'mitasi psul. maybe I have in my bed a defect. In other words, maybe one of my descendants, one of my children, are off the D. Avram, like Avram, Sheyatza Mimenu Yishmael. My grandfather Avram had Yishmael come from him. So maybe it's possible that one of my children are behaving like a Yishmael. V'avi Yitzchak, my father Yitzchak, Sheyatza Mimenu Esav. He had Esav come out from him. Am I so sure that all of my children are pure? So Yaakov was afraid that the reason why the Shekhinah was removed from him would be attributed to the fact that he has a psul in one of his children. Amar lo banav, his children said to him, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Now the way to read it here is Shema Yisrael, they're talking to Yaakov. Listen Yisrael. And they affirmed Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Amr, so Yaakov's Amru, and they said to Yaakov Avinu, She'ein belibcha el echad, just like in your heart there's only one God, kach ein belibenu el echad, so too in our heart there's only one God. So they were trying to reassure Yaakov Avinu that you don't have a psul like Yishmael and like Esau. We all, the same way in your heart, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is one, we're on your team. But also Shah, at that moment, when Yaakov Avinu heard the Shvatim recite Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, Yaakov Avinu says, Pasach Yaakov Avinu v'amar, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso L'olam Va'ed. Blessed is the name, praise be is the name of his glory, of his kingdom forever and ever. So that's the basis where Baruch Shem comes from. Amru Rabbanan Hechin Aved. So the Rabbanan said we're in a dilemma. What should we do? Na'amru, if we say Baruch Shem after Shema Yisrael, Lo Amar Moshe Rabbeinu. It's not a pasuk in the Torah, so we're taking sides with Yaakov over Moshe. Lo Namru, if we don't say Baruch Shem, Amar Yaakov. Yaakov said it. So we're caught between two great mountains. We don't say it where Yaakov said it. We do say it, Moshe didn't say it. Hiskinu, and therefore we instituted Shoya Omer Moso B'Chashai. We say it quietly. And that's the basis for why Baruch Shem is recited quietly. Because on one hand, it's not a pasuk from Moshe Rabbeinu, so how can we say it? On the other hand, how can we not say it? Yaakov Avinu, after hearing his children recite Shema Yisrael, responded with Baruch Shem. So we compromise and we say it quietly. So the Noda B'Yehuda on this Gemara has a couple of points that bother him about this Gemara. So it's on the back page of the first Noda B'Yehuda. The Noda B'Yehuda says, Tzarech Sas Tam. We need to figure out a reason. Mas Shaychus Zeh Shevach. What's the connection to this praise of Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso L'olam Va'ed Ba'oso Pam? Like what's going on over there? The brothers saw Yaakov was nervous, his children saw he was nervous. They said Shema Yisrael, and boom, Yaakov responds Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso L'olam Va'ed. Now, if that was the sequence in the Psukim, okay, they said pasuk 1, he said pasuk 2, but there is no pasuk like that. So Noda B'Yehuda wants to know what exactly is the response of Yaakov Avinu when he says Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso L'olam Va'ed. Secondly, what is this meaning of Bikesh Yaakov Liglot Ketz HaYemin? What is the Ketz HaYemin? So he knows that Rashi explains that it's metaphorically that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's right hand is extended to his back, and we're waiting for the end of that Hashem's right hand is in the forefront. But the Noda B'Yehuda wants to offer a different interpretation to this vague word of the Gemara that Yaakov wanted to reveal the end of the right. V'gam, furthermore, this is a great question, it says, at the end of the day, the brothers affirmed to Yaakov that Kishem Shebelibcha Echad Kach B'Libeinu Echad. So, very nice Yaakov thought something, but it wasn't true what he thought. The brothers really were fully pure. None of them were like Yishmael or Esau. So why was the Shekhinah removed from Yaakov Avinu? It makes sense if actually amongst them, one of them was off. Okay, so they didn't have the Shekhinah reside on him. But in actuality, the brothers were all good. So the Gemara says, Nistalka Shechina Himena. Yaakov thought the reason was because maybe he has a psul from Mitasi. But there wasn't a psul. So if there wasn't a psul, then how do you understand why the Shechina was removed from Yaakov? Very serious question. Right? Because he thought there was a psul, thinking that he wasn't, that's why he attributed the removal of the Shechina from. But at the end of the day, there wasn't. So why was the Shechina removed? Why couldn't Yaakov have the state of mind of the Shechina resting upon him to be able to reveal the case? And if you want to say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't want to let Yaakov reveal the end, he wasn't about to let the cat out of the bag, that's okay. So let the Gemara say that. The Gemara doesn't say that the reason why the Shechina was removed from Yaakov was because Hashem didn't deem it fit to let the cat out of the bag. So then why? It's unclear why the Shechina was removed.
Isn't this parsha called the parsha Stuma?
Yeah.
So it was closed. That's why the door closed. It was closed for Yaakov Avinu. They couldn't see it.
Yeah, but the question is why? We understand that it was.
It's for everybody.
But why? The Gemara doesn't explain why the Shechina was removed from Yaakov. Yaakov thought he understood the reason, but then he was shown that his reason was wrong. All the brothers affirmed their acceptance of Hashem Echad, Ushmo Echad. So he says, what's the reason at the end of the day that the Shechina was removed? So the Rabbi Yehuda develops an unbelievable thought. He says there's two ends. There's the Ketz HaYemin and there's the Ketz HaSmol. And he says he doesn't usually get involved in Nistaros, but he feels that he has a basis from a Rashi and Shemos to this concept of a Ketz HaYemin and a Ketz HaSmol. So what exactly, without getting involved in Nistaros, what exactly is he defining as the Ketz HaYemin and the Ketz HaSmol? So he says the Ketz HaYemin is the ultimate geula through the Midas Haracham. The Ketz HaSmol is a geula that HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings to us after, unfortunately, we have to experience pranios. We have to be cleansed. We're not yet fit to be redeemed as a nation. We're not holding on the level that the Ketz is ready to be ushered in. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to put Klal Yisrael collectively and individually through a cleansing process. And sometimes, unfortunately, the only way to wake us up is to send us a war in Israel, is to send us pranios, is to send us difficulties and trials. Sometimes it's the only way that we can be woken up. So the Rabbi Yehuda says that Yaakov bikish liglos levan of Ketz HaYemin. Yaakov wanted to reveal to his children the end of the right, meaning the geula that's going to come through the Midas Rachamim. Why? Look what he says. Ki haya misyare. Yaakov was scared. Shalo yachol la'amod b'nisayim. That Klal Yisrael, the Shvatim, will not be able to withhold the challenges and the difficulties that a bitter gullus brings. To be mekabel the tzaros with panios v'chavli Mashiach, to really endure all the tzaros and the difficulties during the birth pangs of Mashiach. So Yaakov wanted to reveal to them the Ketz HaYemin, the geula that comes about through the racham of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But says in the Yehuda, Avu be'emes, in truth, Yisrael kedoshim heim. Klal Yisrael are holy. V'heim muchunim, and they're prepared. They're ready. Lisbol to tolerate all the pranios that come our way. Klal Yisrael is a holy nation. We're a resilient nation. We understand that it's there to cleanse us, to make us fit for the ultimate geula. So Yaakov miscalculated the strength and the force and the power of Klal Yisrael. Yaakov wanted to reveal the Ketz HaYemin because he thought we couldn't endure a bitter gullus. But really, in truth and actuality, Klal Yisrael are kedoshim heim. And as much as the difficulties and the suffering are hard, we're a resilient nation, and we could endure, and we could live through the different difficulties of gullus and still remain steadfast. That's the back. So therefore, the Rabbi Yehuda says that's why the Shechina was removed from Yaakov, because he accused his children, representative of Klal Yisrael, of not being able to withstand the difficulties of Galus. Abu Yaakov Hayosavar, Yaakov thought that there was a different reason. So in truth, the reason why the Shekhinah was removed from Yaakov is because Yaakov, on some level, didn't give enough credence to the resilience of Klal Yisrael. And he was Bikesh Liglot Hayamin. He thought we couldn't endure the small, the geula that comes about after being sent stories like Haman, etc. So that's why the Shekhinah was removed. But Yaakov thought that the Shekhinah was removed from him because maybe there's a psul amongst his children. And therefore Yaakov asked them, is there a psul like Avram, the one that had Yishmael come out of him, like Yitzchak that had Esav? So he goes, the Rabbi says there's more to the question. Yaakov wasn't just asking them, hey, are one of you guys Yishmael? Are one of you guys Esav? There was more to the question. He wanted to know if any of them were pogame in the Yamin or the Yishmael. Because he says it's times, and Mrs. Sharm talks about this, there are times that people go off because they're bestowed with too much good. Like Yishma, Yeshur, and Vayiva. Sometimes a person gets haughty if he's blessed with too much good. At times, it's always an asayon, if the person has pranios, like Eov. If there's too much difficulties, if there's too much challenges, that could also cause a person to go astray. So Yaakov was trying to poke. Is there any of these two things, the fact that either one of you had too much good or too much bad, that might have caused you to go astray? How is that asking anyone like Avram, anyone like Yitzchak? So he says Avram Avinu is representative of the Midas HaChesed, right? Midaso Yochicho, Avram fed and gave to drink. He escorted all his guests. He was Mechiras, so many people to Emunah Shlema. There's no bigger Baal Chesed than Avram Avinu. So Yaakov was asking them, has any of you been blessed with too much tov that perhaps might have caused you to be led astray? Yaakov then asked them, how about, are any of you because of Yitzchak? Yitzchak, Pachad Yitzchak. Yitzchak was representative of Din. Have any of you had too many difficulties in life that might have caused you to question, that might have caused you to go astray? So Yaakov was investigating if this was perhaps any of the underlying reasons that the Shvatim were not ready to have the Kates revealed. Now, in actuality, the reason why the Shekhinah was removed was because he was choshesh that Klal Yisrael wasn't resilient enough. Yaakov, in his mindset, thought that maybe the Midas Harachamim, maybe Din Harachamim was the cause for any one of his children to go astray. Now, with this context, we can understand. They responded, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. What was their response? So now, it's beautiful, it says in Rabbi Yehuda. Hashem is the Midas Harachamim. Elokeinu is the Midas Hadin. Hashem Echad. The Shvatim were reassuring Yaakov Avinu. We know everything is Rachamim. We didn't go off like because of too much din or too much Rachamim. We understand that Hashem and Elokeinu, we understand Kol Chesed Rachamim Nachshav. Umekablim b'simcha zeh kemo zeh. We accept everything b'simcha. To us, we understand. We don't have to wait the Yosef Babo to see the clarity that everything was the Tov. We can understand it now. We're being mekabel upon ourselves b'simcha. So with that, Yaakov Avinu saw that they weren't poging in the small, and they weren't poging in the Yamin. He saw that they understood that the ultimate plan of HaKadosh Baruch Hu included that everything that happens is for our good. So Yaakov was confident then that they didn't go off because of the pranios. They would be able to be resilient. So Yaakov had tremendous comfort. He was probing if there any weakness in his children because they were exposed to too much din. And they told him, Hashem Elokeinu. Midas Harachamim and the Midas Hadin is all echad, is all one. Yosef Yoshes Yodo Alenecha. We close our eyes when we say Kriya Shema, because we block out any din that we see. Because we know, even though we don't understand, but we know Hashem Echad. We know that Hashem is one, and we know that it all emanates from Racham. But then the Noda Yehuda continues, and he says an unbelievable thing. He says, let's go back to the Gemara in Psachim on Daf Nun. The Gemara says, "Bayomahu yiyeh Hashem echad u'shmo echad." So he quotes the last part of the Gemara. What's u'shmo echad? It says in Rabbi Yehuda. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, lo ba'olam hazeh olam haba. Olam hazeh is nichtov yud kei vav kei. That's how the Shem Hashem is written. V'nikra, and it's read aleph daled nun. Aleph daled. The olam haba, shemo echad, nichtov yud kei vav kei, and it's read aleph daled. It's read yud kei. V'omar ani, you know what Yehuda says? The Gemara doesn't mean that the Olam Haba, the Yosef Lavo, the name Aleph Daled is going to be gone. It says Chalila. They're both going to be intact. Yud Kei, Vav Kei, Aleph Daled, both of the Shemos of HaKadosh Baruch Hu are going to be intact. He says, what's the understanding? Avakach HaPerush. This is the understanding. Kishem Aleph Daled. The name Aleph Daled, which is the way we read it now, Mora Kihu Adon HaKol Vavada. The name is saying Hashem is the master of all, and in order to be a master, you need a subject. So we're his slaves. V'zeh Mora Amuch Bachuso. The name Aleph Daled is manifestation of his malchus. Kein Melech B'lo Am Shehem Avada. So that's representative of the Midas Hadin. The Yud Kei Vav Kei is representative of Midas Harachman. Hayahove V'yiyah. But the Aleph Daled Adon HaKol, that is representative of the Midas Hadin. Mashen Kein Shem Havoi Hu Etzem Rachaman. And he says, I quoted earlier in my Pirush from Ephraim Zal, who explained that the Yosef Lavo, we're going to look back at this world and we're going to see that everything was really the Midah of Rachaman. So he says that's the pshat, and what the Gemara means is Shmo Echad. Yud Kei Vav Kei and Aleph Daled. Here in this world, Yud Kei Vav Kei is Rachaman. We read it Aleph Daled because we don't always see the Rachaman. To us, it looks like Din. We see challenges, we see difficulties, we see pain, we see suffering, we see sorrows. It's Din. It's Adon HaKol. It's the master over all. The Yosef Lavo will be Shemo Echad, because everything will be blessed with the clarity that everything is Racham. We'll be able to look back and see that it's all Racham. So there's no difference between the shame of Yud Kei Vav Kei and the shame of Aleph Daled, because anything and everything ultimately is Racham. And therefore, he says, this name is indicative of the Kavod HaMalchus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ki himor shu Adon al HaKol. It shows that he rules over everybody with Rachamim. So when the Zakin heard, when Yaakov Avinu heard, that they recognized Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, they recognized that there's no difference between Yud Kei Vav Kei and Aleph Daled, between Hashem and Elokeinu. When they saw that, Vim King Gam Shem Aleph Daled Hu Rachamim. Yaakov realized that even the name of Aleph Daled is Rachamim. The Shvatim at Yaakov's deathbed, they were able to affirm to Yaakov Avinu that to us the Midas HaRachamim and the Midas Hadin is all the same. It's Echad. They were able to see that clarity even here in this world, even going through the difficulties and trials and tribulations. So Yaakov realized that that's representative of what we're all going to be zocha to see the Yosef Lavo. So therefore, Ushmo Echad, because Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is more Rachamim, and Aleph Daled, which leans towards Din, is all going to be Echad. It's all going to be one. Because just as the Shvatim showed that even here they're able to see Hashem Echad, when we have the clarity of the Yosef Lavo, we'll be able to see the Hashem Echad, Ushmo Echad. And therefore, Yaakov understood that the Shem Aleph Daled will remain forever. Because there, in the Yosef Lavo, it'll be Rachamim. So therefore, the name can remain. Because we're going to have the clarity that there's not two separate names. It's all one. It's all Rachamim. And that's why the response of Yaakov, the appropriate response of Yaakov, was Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuso V'Olam Va'ed. Blessed is his name. We asked in the beginning, why name? Amin Yehei Shmei. Why are we focused on the name? This is why we're focused on the name, because that's precisely the point. The name of Aleph Dalet, representative in this world of Din, that name will be the Olam Va'ed, because the Asilava will be blessed with the clarity that it's really Yud Kei Vav Kei. It's really one of the same, because everything is Rachamim. Everything emanates from the Midah of Rachamim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore, Yaakov Avinu, after seeing a living example of even in today's world, the Shvatim were able to affirm Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, that the Rachamim and Din of HaKadosh Baruch Hu all is one. Yaakov Avinu responded, Baruch Shem, blessed is his name. The name of Aleph Dalet is going to remain the Olam Va'ed forever and ever. Because we're going to have the clarity that both Rachamim and Din are really, truly one of the same. Because there is no such thing as Din. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is purely there to bestow goodness upon Klal Yisrael. Sometimes the way in which Hashem achieves his results is through things that are Din. The story of Yosef is one of the biggest examples that we have. You look at the story as it unfolds, it's full of Din. Poor kid in the pit, sold off, exiled to Mitzrayim, house of Potiphar, thrown into jail, never knowing when he's coming out. And then all of a sudden, the story starts shifting, and we take a look back. We see the Rachamim. That's the clarity that we're all going to be blessed with, the Yosef Rabbi. Obviously, it's extremely difficult when we go through in Olam Hazeh, and we don't have the 2020, we don't have the Monday morning quarterback hindsight. We don't have the ability to always see where the midah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Rachamim is. And to us it looks like Din. And we even acknowledge that, Baruch Dayna Emes. However, we have to keep in mind that even though it looks like Din, it's really Hashem Echad U'Shmo Echad. It's really HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a plan for us. HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us, and we're his children, he's our father, and he is looking out for the best of us, whether or not this might ultimately be 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years later, where the Rachamim was. We're not going to see that. But it helps to reassure ourselves as we're going through the trials and tribulations and difficulties, whether it be personal tzaros, or community tzaros, or klal tzaros. It's so essential to really keep that focus of Hashem Echad U'Shmo Echad. And that's what Rashi in Devarim is adding to the Kavanah in Kriya Shema. Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem who is our God now, but not the God of the Umos. Hashem Echad, then in the future, V'haya Hashem L'melech HaKol Haaretz. Because once everyone is able to see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Kulo HaTava, it's only Klal Yisrael who are Kadoshim. It's only Klal Yisrael who are resilient and are able to withstand the Ketz HaSmal. Yaakov Avinu suspected that the Shvatim needed to be revealed the Ketz HaYemin. They wouldn't be able to withstand and endure the difficulties of Galus. But Hashem knew different. Hashem knew that we're made resilient. We always bounce back, and we're strong as a nation. And we could endure the difficulties, we can endure the sufferings, and Klal Yisrael will always remain committed, and Klal Yisrael will always accept upon themselves the Malchus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu, not the Elokei Umos. They need Hashem Echad. They need to see the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Kula Rachamim in order to be Mekabel Omach HaShemayim upon themselves. We, Klal Yisrael, we're okay with the Yemin and the Small. We're okay with having Din and still keeping the focus of Hashem Echad. And that's an additional kavanah that a person could have when reciting the pasuk of Kriya Shema. But again, for the halacha purposes, the main kavanah is what we discussed in the beginning. And if you want to refresh yourself with that, it's the last page on the in the Dibros Moshe, in the Igros Moshe. It's Chelek Hey, Siman Hey, and the Archaim in Igros Moshe. He goes through the B'diavad, what you need to have kavanah, and we should all be zocha together, the Meher of Yameinu, to see the time in which indeed we'll have the clarity of Hashem Echad U'Shmo Echad.
Very nice.